I want you to just picture something for a second. Imagine you are standing in this vast industrial shipping yard.
Yep.
It's late March, just days before Easter weekend, right?
Okay.
And you are staring at a completely empty space on the asphalt where 12 tons of chocolate is supposed to be.
That is, I mean, that's just a massive amount of chocolate.
Specifically, 413,793 KitKat bars. Just gone. Poof.
It's a really remarkable image to try and hold in your head. Just the sheer physical volume of 12 tons of consumer goods vanishing into thin air without a single trace.
It sounds like the inciting incident of a heist movie.
It really does.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We're unpacking what the internet officially dubbed the Great KitKat Heist.
Yes. The 2026 Easter Heist.
Right. So we have this really fascinating stack of media intelligence data covering March 28th to April 3rd. And our goal today is to figure out how a highly disruptive multi-million-dollar supply chain theft was somehow engineered into an absolute masterclass in viral marketing.
Which is no small feat.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We're going to explore why their social media response worked so well, how it contrasts with standard corporate PR, and then break down how different platforms reacted to the whole crisis.
And we have, substantial data to map this out. We're looking at Pendulum, which is the media intelligence platform we pulled these analytics from.
Right.
And they processed over 7,600 posts and analyzed more than 93 hours of video content across the internet. So we can really see the exact mechanics of how this narrative just exploded.
But, okay, before we even touch that data, I have to bring up the elephant in the room.
The timing.
The timing. It's incredibly suspicious. This data covers the end of March right through the first few days of April. Given that this happened squarely around April Fool's Day, was this whole thing just, a massive corporate prank?
Right, because reading through the initial reports, that's the immediate assumption everyone makes.
Exactly. I thought it was a stunt.
It's the most logical conclusion. It feels entirely like a manufactured stunt. But what makes this case study so compelling is that it absolutely was not a stunt. Wait, really?
Really, both Nestle and local European law enforcement authorities had to issue formal statements confirming that this was a legitimate logistics breach.
Wow.
A literal truck transporting these 12 tons of cargo completely vanished in transit on its way from Italy to Poland.
So a real, actual crime.
A verifiable international logistics crime, which, honestly, makes the marketing pivot we're about to discuss even more extraordinary.
Yeah, because they didn't manufacture a safe, controlled crisis for attention.
Exactly. They took a very real, very expensive operational disaster and just flipped the script.
So let's examine that pivot. Because to truly appreciate the brilliance of what KitKat did here, I think we need to establish how a standard corporation usually handles a crisis of this magnitude.
Oh, absolutely. The traditional playbook.
Right. And I always think of traditional corporate PR crisis management as being like throwing a tarp over a house fire.
A tarp over a house fire. Okay, unpack that for me. Well, historically, the corporate instinct is just to hide the damage, right? Something goes wrong, the lawyers get involved, and the brand throws this heavy, stifling tarp over the entire situation.
Yeah, they lock it down.
Right. They issue an incredibly stiff, emotionless press release saying, we are currently working with local authorities and cannot comment further.
The standard boilerplate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they just go completely silent. But the tarp doesn't actually put out the fire.
Because the fire is social media.
Yes. It just traps all the smoke until the speculation explodes and makes the brand look guilty or, just incompetent.
That captures the traditional playbook perfectly. I mean, the goal historically has been damage control through total invisibility.
Hide the problem.
Right. You do not want consumers associating your product with theft, with black markets, or with systemic supply chain failures.
No, definitely not.
And you certainly don't want your shareholders thinking your logistics network is vulnerable to a single hijacked truck.
Especially right before a major candy-buying holiday like Easter. And it wasn't just standard chocolate either. The missing cargo included these highly specific, limited edition Formula One-shaped KitKat bars.
Right, the F1 bars.
So you've lost a premium, highly anticipated product. The instinct to just pull that tarp tight and go dark must have been overwhelming.
Oh, for sure. But they threw the playbook out entirely.
They really did.
Instead of downplaying the 12-ton loss, KitKat leaned fully into the absurdity of the situation. Instead of hiding, they launched an interactive online tool called the Stolen KitKat Tracker.
Which is just wild to me.
It is. They publicly urged their customers to look at the back of their candy wrappers, find the 8-digit batch code, and enter it into this online database to see if the chocolate they just bought was technically stolen goods.
But wait, I have to ask, isn't there a huge legal risk here?
How do you mean?
Well, if someone actually found a stolen batch, KitKat just crowdsourced the discovery of fenced goods. Were they actually coordinating this tracker with Polish and Italian law enforcement, or were they just, playing with fire?
That is the genius of the deflection. The tracker itself was real, but it functioned primarily as a psychological pressure valve.
Okay.
Legally, yes. If an entire pallet of the stolen batch showed up in a specific European supermarket, that data point would be useful to investigators.
Sure, that makes sense.
But from a marketing perspective, it completely disarmed the negative press.
Because if you try to hide a story about a hijacked truck full of candy, the internet is going to mock you relentlessly.
Precisely. By refusing to downplay it, by saying, hey, we lost 12 tons of chocolate, help us find it, they neutralized the crisis.
They took the joke away from the internet by making the joke themselves.
Exactly. And psychologically, this strategy does something very powerful. It shifts the consumer from being a passive bystander, someone just reading a weird news headline about a theft, into an active participant.
They gave the public a job to do.
They gave them a job.
A true crime job, no less.
Yeah.
Which is basically the internet's favorite hobby right now.
It really triggers the brain's reward center. When you gamify a crisis like this, the data spikes are immediate and they are profound.
Let's hear the numbers.
Across that week, mentions of the brand surged by nearly 200%, hitting 17.9K mentions. The impressions reached 48.8 million, with 11.1 million actual engagements.
Okay, I want to challenge those metrics for a second.
Go ahead.
We hear numbers like 48 million impressions all the time in marketing.
Right.
But an impression just means a post scrolled past someone's screen, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Attention does not always equal participation. So how do we know people didn't just chuckle at the concept of a stolen KitKat tracker and then just keep scrolling? Like, did anyone actually go to the site?
That is the ultimate question for any digital campaign, and this is where Pendulum's Optical Character Recognition data provides the answer.
Optical Character Recognition, or OCR.
Yes.
Break down how that actually works in this context, because it's not just searching for text hashtags, is it?
No, it goes far beyond text. OCR is essentially machine vision. The software scans the actual visual pixels of images and frames of video uploaded by users across the internet. It can identify shapes, text within an image, and specific visual branding.
Oh, wow.
And the OCR tools detected the distinct visual logo and interface of the stolen KitKat tracker in 1.9K instances of user-generated content.
Wait, really? So nearly 2,000 people didn't just tweet a link.
Yeah.
They physically recorded their computer or phone screens, showing themselves using the interface.
Yes. And that is just the fraction of users who bothered to upload video evidence of themselves doing it. It proves widespread, hands-on adoption of the tool.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own habits for a second. Think about the last time you bought a candy bar.
Right.
Would you ever, under any normal circumstance, bother to read the tiny printed 8-digit manufacturing code on the back of the wrapper?
I definitely wouldn't.
Probably not. But KitKat found the single psychological trigger that would make you do it. The feeling of being part of an unfolding mystery.
They essentially gamified the real world. Furthermore, if you analyze the audio data across platforms, the terms 12-ton and batch code appeared in 40% of all video transcripts related to the brand during this window.
40% of all brand-related video conversations suddenly revolved around supply chain logistics. That is staggering.
Think about the historical context here. Usually, conversations around a consumer packaged goods brand are about a new flavor, a holiday promotion, or maybe a baking recipe.
Yes, standard consumer stuff.
Exactly. KitKat successfully hijacked their own brand narrative. They shifted the global conversation from standard consumer talk to an interactive, true crime digital scavenger hunt.
So they got hijacked in the real world. So they hijacked the digital world in response.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
So we know everyone was deeply engaged with this mystery. But what really jumped out to me in these intelligence reports is that the online detective community did not just gather in one giant room to talk about this.
No, it was very fragmented.
Right. The way people engaged with this heist fractured dramatically depending on what social media platform they were using.
Yeah.
And I think it reveals so much about human behavior.
The response was definitely not a monolith. The platform personality differences here highlight exactly how modern digital culture digests a breaking news event.
Right. The need for narrative drama naturally gives way to the need for visual evidence. So let's start with the platform that craves narrative more than any other, TikTok.
Yes, TikTok.
Looking at the numbers, TikTok generated a solid 3.1 million engagements, but a jaw-dropping 39.4 million impressions.
TikTok acted as the broadcast network for this event. The algorithm there thrives on high-energy, escalating narratives, and it was driven heavily by Gen Z creators.
Makes sense.
The content on TikTok was overwhelmingly about the story.
The storytellers. I was looking through the notes, and there was this entire heist culture phenomenon happening.
Oh, yeah.
People weren't just reporting the news, they were doing elaborate Fast and Furious-style parodies, but substituting stolen DVD players for F1-shaped chocolate bars.
You had major creators driving vast reach by treating this like a Hollywood blockbuster. The conversation leaped entirely out of food brand circles.
It went mainstream.
Completely.
Yeah.
You had massive hip-hop and pop culture aggregator accounts like the Rap Page with its 11.4 million followers amplifying the heist narrative.
Wow.
You even had local hard news stations like NBC 10 Boston creating highly produced dramatic news summaries of the theft. Top creators like Daily Mailuk hit 8.8 million impressions just doing high-production news recaps.
Which is incredibly funny to me. Treating a candy theft with the gravity of an international diamond heist.
It's absurd, but it works.
And the algorithm just fed on that drama. But there was another trend on TikTok that I found totally fascinating. The intelligence data picked up something called the Easter Bunny anomaly.
Ah, yes. The unscripted audio transcripts highlighted a very specific recurring theme.
Because this happened at the end of March, people were filming these unscripted direct camera reactions. And the software caught this wave of users who were jokingly, or perhaps half-jokingly, panicking that there's going to be an Easter stash shortage.
Right.
People were saying things like, the Easter Bunny's supply chain is ruined.
It perfectly illustrates how consumers tether corporate events to their own personal lives. It took a distant logistics issue in Europe and made it feel immediately relevant to their own weekend plans.
It added personal stakes to the narrative.
Exactly. So TikTok was the movie theater, Fast and Furious jokes, dramatic news reading, and Easter Bunny panic.
But as we said, that need for drama eventually transitions into a need for verification, which brings us to Instagram.
A totally different ecosystem.
Right. It actually captured the largest share of pure engagement. 7.1 million actual interactions compared to TikTok's 3.1 million. Why did the active participation shift so heavily over there?
Because Instagram users acted as the visual sleuths. The platform is naturally driven by aesthetics and still imagery. KitKat's official stolen KitKat Tracker had this incredibly sleek, clean, almost futuristic design. That visual naturally thrived on a platform built for polished images.
That makes perfect sense. It acts like an interactive infographic. You see a clean, compelling image on your feed, it prompts you to check your wrapper, and you immediately leave a comment with your result.
And while TikTok was heavily focused on the cinematic drama, Instagram was driven by viral trivia and visual context.
Give me an example of that.
Well, some of the top-performing content on Instagram wasn't about the heist itself, but about the physics of the crime.
The physics.
Yeah. Creators like Today You're Sold drove massive engagement simply by posting visual comparisons, trying to contextualize how heavy 12 tons actually is.
Oh, because 12 tons of F1-shaped chocolate is a completely abstract concept.
Exactly.
I would absolutely need a visual chart to understand how many pallets that actually is, or what kind of truck you would even need to steal it.
Providing that visual context became a trend of its own. And notably, KitKat's own official Instagram account was a massive driver of this engagement.
Their transparency post, right?
Yes. Their organic post where they maintained complete transparency and explicitly clarified that this was an ongoing police matter and not an April Fool's joke was one of the top-performing assets across the entire internet.
So if TikTok treated the event like a blockbuster movie franchise, Instagram treated it like a sleek, interactive trivia game.
That is a very accurate analogy. And once you move past those two giants, the fringes of the digital ecosystem fill out the rest of the behavioral spectrum.
Let's talk about those fringes.
Well, X, formerly Twitter, generated over 200,000 engagements, and it served its traditional purpose, a hub for real-time cynical commentary.
Of course it did.
It was used primarily for real-time news updates and for other rival brands to jump into the thread and roast KitKat for losing a truck.
Classic Twitter. Just sitting in the peanut gallery, throwing popcorn and making cynical jokes while the house fire burns.
Meanwhile, Over on Facebook, the tone was completely devoid of irony.
Really?
Yeah. It drove tens of thousands of impressions, mostly among local community groups expressing genuine, sincere anxiety about local Easter candy shortages.
Sincere local panic on Facebook, cynical snark on Twitter. It is comforting to know some rules of the internet never change.
I really don't.
But we have to address the dark horse in this data set
Yeah.
because while everyone is memeing on the surface web, there is an entirely different conversation happening underground. I'm talking about Telegram.
Yes. The Telegram data introduces a stark reality check into this marketing triumph. It reminds us of the actual real-world consequences of this theft.
The numbers shocked me. Telegram had almost 500,000 engagements, over 450,000,
It's huge.
on an encrypted messaging app. What were they possibly discussing in those channels?
The intelligence suggests that within these niche, often encrypted Telegram groups, the conversation had absolutely nothing to do with Fast and Furious memes or gamified batch code trackers.
No.
These groups were legitimately discussing the black market potential of the stolen goods.
Let's just pause on that. While millions of people are laughing and entering batch codes on an Instagram infographic, there is an actual subterranean economy trying to figure out how to physically fence 400,000 F1-shaped candy bars across European borders.
It is a sobering contrast. Beneath the viral marketing triumph, this remains an unresolved, highly organized logistics crime.
Yeah.
And for KitKat's corporate security team, monitoring those Telegram channels is likely far more critical than any engagement metric. That data is about asset recovery and preventing future breaches.
It truly is a true crime story from top to bottom. The public gets the mystery novel, and the security team gets the actual police procedural.
It is a multi-layered event, and if we synthesize all of this, the platform data, the gamification psychology, the PR strategy, the verdict on KitKat's handling of this crisis is incredibly clear.
They took what should have been a complete operational disaster, a supply chain nightmare involving a hijacked truck in Poland right before their biggest sales weekend, and they entirely subverted the traditional corporate playbook.
They refuse to throw the tarp over the fire.
Yes.
Oh.
By trusting their community to join in on the narrative, and by building the digital architecture for them to do so safely with the stolen KitKat Tracker, they turned a 12-ton loss into a global, interactive masterclass in brand resilience.
They neutralized the negative sentiment by owning their vulnerability. They didn't just survive an embarrassing news cycle, they profited from it in terms of brand equity, cultural relevance, and unprecedented consumer participation.
It is a brilliant pivot. But, looking at these staggering engagement numbers, 11.1 million interactions, nearly 50 million impressions, global headlines, it leaves you with a really provocative question about the future of marketing.
Where does your mind go with that?
Well, if a literal 12-ton cargo theft can be flipped into one of the biggest marketing wins of the year simply through gamification. Wait, let me rephrase that. If they can win that big from a disaster, what happens when brands start hoping for logistical anomalies?
Oh, that changes the entire incentive structure of corporate crisis management.
It really does.
Uh-huh.
We are already so accustomed to brands manufacturing fake controversies or staging Twitter feuds just for attention.
Sure.
But what if real-time supply chain issues become the next big interactive entertainment genre? Are we going to see marketing departments quietly popping champagne when a pallet of premium goods gets accidentally rerouted to the wrong country just because they know they can turn it into an internet-wide scavenger hunt?
It blurs the line between an operational failure and a marketing campaign. If the engagement is high enough, the loss of the product might just be seen as the cost of advertising.
Exactly. The product basically becomes the marketing budget.
That is a wild thought.
So, to you listening, the next time you hear about a shipping container going missing or a cargo truck taking a mysterious wrong turn, ask yourself a question. Are you just reading the daily news, or are you about to be recruited as an unpaid deputy in a brand's new digital detective agency?
I'll definitely be checking my wrappers.
Something to chew on. Maybe while you check the 8-digit code on the back of your next candy wrapper.